Yep. Whoa!
Here he comes. Yeah.
Isn't it funny how a day pans out?
G'day, I'm Gavin from Hurleysflyfishing and welcome to another episode of On the Fly. Today we're up on the Thredbo River up near Jindabyne, which is about 7 hours from Melbourne and probably 3 or 4 from Sydney. We're up here, it's pretty late in the season, we're in halfway through May, and that generally signals from the lake Jindabyne trout to swim upstream once we've had a little bit of rain. It's a little bit quiet at the moment, but hopefully there might be still some fish in the river, and we'll target them with some bead flies, and they'll take that as an egg pattern, and it generally works pretty well up here. It's an amazing fishery that anything out of a lake you can get some pretty big fish, so we're hoping to encounter ones that, you know, like they can be up to even like 10 pounds, but there's going to be a lot of fish, perhaps 2, 3, 4 pound, which are great for Australia as well. So we're going to walk downstream a bit. It's an amazing stream with some fantastic scenery as well, and we're going to fish our way back upstream and hopefully put these flies in front of a couple of fish and show you what the threadbow fish look like up close. Now it's pretty important when you come to quite a cold climate that you've got the gear, not only just rods and reels, but also your clothing. So you want a good pair of breathable waders, because you can at times walk a little way. Some good sturdy boots. At times, if I'm crossing and it's a bit strong, I'll use like a wading staff, and that gives you a bit more stability. The gear, I always tend to use like a 9 foot in a 6 weight, because you're going to have potentially some pretty big lake fish, and you're casting, our setup has some split shot through it. You need something with a bit of punch in it. So that allows you to throw it up and not put too many in the back of your ear. You can get away with quite a bright line as well, because these fish are generally going to be lake fish, so they're not street smart fish that see your line and will be scared. So this is quite helpful to see your line in the current, and a good sturdy reel, like a stalker, something with a good decent drag on it, because if you do get that fish of a lifetime, you want to stay connected. Now the setup we use is quite different to your normal sort of fishing, I guess. We're casting upstream, but using what we call like a beaded system, and that's something that was invented over in America, generally for your Alaskan sort of areas with the salmon and the spawning runs and the trout that feed on them. So what we essentially use, we have 2 beads, and they're essentially the same size as a trout egg in the same sort of colour. And trailing that by about 3 or 4 inches below that, we have like a nymph. So the fish will quite often just take that bead in its mouth as an egg pattern, and then the nymph hooks it either on the inside when it's coming out or just on the outside of its mouth. So for catch and release, that spells good news for the trout, because they're not going to get hooked right down near their gills, which happens so often when you're using a glow bug. So it's a much better system to be using for catch and release, and it's extremely effective. You do make sure you put on a split shot or 2 if there is a bit of flow there as well, because these have got to be bouncing along the bottom as you'd expect like an unweighted egg to be. And I think because of the close season, we don't pay enough attention to the trout eating eggs, and it's got to be a major food source. On that, I have an indicator, and that's the lifeblood of the whole system. As that drifts along, as soon as that goes under, you've got to strike, because you're expecting a trout to have that in his mouth. Sometimes it might be on a log or a stick or a rock or whatever, but you've still got to strike every time. But yeah, it's a great system. We've just got to put it in front of some fish. Now it is pretty important that when you get to the river, that you don't just cast, literally willy-nilly throw it up there and expect something to happen. If you can't see any fish, I talk about a lot, you've got to break it down, that river, into a grid. And by doing that, you might cast onto the left side and then go a metre over, a metre over and a metre over. And you literally got to work that water, and you're hoping that there's a fish somewhere in the middle of that. But once you've cast all that area and worked as far to the right as you can, then you can go up a couple of metres and do that same distance cast. And then that's going to put that fly, hopefully, in front of some fish. When you do get a snag and it's a good bit of water, instead of running straight up to unhook it, you can do a roll cast. And what that will do is throw the line in front of that snag and hopefully pull it out the other end. Saves that water so you can still go up and keep fishing it and pull out a couple of fish. There you go. We've a couple of casts there and it sort of went under and it didn't sort of feel like anything. We've been catching a few bigger fish recently. And that's we've got a tiny little rainbow. It's almost from the Stevenson, that one, but it's just on the side there. And they will at times like hook them not directly in the mouth as they lunge at these beads. Let him grow a bit bigger. We're sort of after his grandfather, something, you know, about 5 times the size of him, but they still all count. They all count. Now it's interesting, we've come to like a great pool here which could hold both some fish coming up to spawn or even some good resident fish as well. It looks to be quite deep, so you need to adjust the indicator, and the system we use is the merino wool through the tube, and that allows it to be adjusted. And you must do that because we want these flies and egg patterns to be bouncing right near the bottom, and that's no good if they're, you know, like a couple of feet off the surface. So adjust that to give it plenty of depth to sink down, and you never know what might be in this pool. Every time that indicator goes down, you've got to strike like you're expecting a fish. Sometimes it might be rocks. You've got to give it that whack and hopefully there's that thump on the end of it.